Imagine a princess who refused to marry any man who couldn't defeat her in a wrestling match. By the end of her life, she owned a herd of 10,000 horses. Every single one of them won from the noblemen and warriors who tried and failed to pin her to the dirt.
This wasn't a fairy tale or a myth. This was the reality of Khutulun, the great-great-granddaughter of Genghis Khan, a woman who became the most feared warrior of the Mongol Steppe.
To understand Khutulun, you have to understand the world she was born into. The year was approximately 1260. The Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in human history, was beginning to fracture. The unity established by Genghis Khan was dissolving into a series of bitter civil wars between his descendants.
In the heart of Central Asia, in what is today Western Mongolia and Xinjiang, a man named Kaidu was rising to power. Kaidu was Khutulun's father, and he was a traditionalist. He believed that the great Khan in the east, his cousin Kublai Khan, had become too soft, too Chinese, and had abandoned the rugged nomadic roots of the Mongol people. Khutulun was born into this atmosphere of constant warfare and cultural defiance. She was one of many children, but from an early age she stood apart. While the Mongol culture generally afforded women more rights and higher status than many contemporary civilizations, Khutulun pushed those boundaries to their absolute limits. She wasn't content with managing the camp or overseeing the logistics of the nomadic lifestyle. She wanted to be where the blood was spilled. She wanted to be on the front lines. As she grew, it became clear that Khutulun possessed an almost supernatural physical strength. She was tall, powerfully built, and possessed an iron will. In the Mongol tradition, wrestling, or burh, was more than just a sport. It was a test of character, a religious ritual, and a fundamental requirement for any soldier. In this world of elite athletes and hardened killers, Khutulun was better than almost everyone.
Her father, Kaidu, recognized her talent early on. He didn't see her as a political pawn to be married off for an alliance. He saw her as his most trusted advisor and his most effective military commander. But the pressure for a royal princess to marry was immense.
In the Mongol courts, a marriage was a strategic treaty. Her refusal to marry normally could have been a disaster for her father's political standing. So Khutulun made a public decree that would become the stuff of legend. She announced that she would marry any man who could defeat her in a wrestling match. But there was a catch. If the suitor lost, he had to forfeit 100 horses to her. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a high-stakes gamble. Horses were the currency of the steppe, the lifeblood of the Mongol military machine. To lose 100 horses was to lose a fortune. Men came from every corner of the empire. Princes from the Middle East, tribal leaders from the north, and famous champions from the heart of Mongolia all arrived at Kaidu's court, confident they could best a woman. They saw her beauty and her status, and they underestimated her strength. One by one, they stepped into the ring, and one by one, Khutulun threw them into the dust. The most famous account of these matches involves a particularly wealthy and handsome prince who arrived with 1,000 horses, betting them all on a single match. He was so certain of his victory that the court and even Khutulun's own father pleaded with her to let him win. They wanted the alliance, they wanted the marriage, but Khutulun refused to compromise. She stated that if she was to be mastered, it would be by a man's strength, not by her own pity. The match lasted longer than most. The prince was strong, and he knew how to move, but Khutulun was a force of nature. She waited for the moment his balance shifted, seized him, and slammed him to the ground. He left the camp without a wife and without 1,000 of his finest steeds. Khutulun remained undefeated, her herd growing larger with every failed proposal. Eventually, she possessed 10,000 horses, a number that equaled the strength of a full Mongol division, or a Tumen. She was, in her own right, one of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in Central Asia.
But Khutulun's life was not defined solely by the wrestling ring. She was a general of the highest order. When Kaidu went to war against his cousin Kublai Khan, Khutulun was at his side. She was known for a specific, terrifying tactic on the battlefield.
They say that in the heat of battle, Khutulun would ride out from the Mongol ranks like a hawk diving for its prey. She would gallop straight into the heart of the enemy lines, seize a high-ranking officer or a prominent warrior, and literally pluck him off his horse with one hand.
She would then ride back to her own lines, carrying the captive like a trophy. This wasn't just a display of strength, it was psychological warfare. The sight of their strongest men being snatched away by a woman who seemed untouchable broke the morale of the enemy forces.
For decades, Khutulun and her father held their ground against the overwhelming resources of the Yuan dynasty. They lived the life of the true nomads, moving with the seasons, fighting on horseback, and maintaining the traditions of Genghis Khan.
Khutulun was so effective as a leader that Kaidu attempted to do something virtually unheard of in Mongol history. He tried to name her as his successor. Kaidu had many sons, at least 14 of them, yet he believed that none of them possessed the strategic mind or the warrior spirit of Khutulun.
This decision, however, was a bridge too far for the Mongol nobility. The tribal leaders and even her own brothers bristled at the idea of a woman officially ruling the Khanate. It sparked a political firestorm that threatened to tear Kaidu's realm apart from the inside. Khutulun, ever the pragmatist, saw the writing on the wall. She knew that her father's insistence on her taking the throne would lead to a bloody civil war among her brothers. To preserve the stability of her father's legacy, she supported the claim of one of her brothers, while remaining the power behind the throne. The mystery of Khutulun begins with her death. She died in 1306, only a few years after her father. The circumstances of her passing are shrouded in silence. Some historical records suggest she died in battle, a fitting end for a woman who lived for the fight.
Others hint at more sinister possibilities, that her brothers, fearful of her influence and her claim to the throne, may have had a hand in her demise. After her death, the narrative of Khutulun began to shift. In the West, her story was transformed through the lens of European imagination.
Marco Polo's accounts of the wrestler princess traveled back to Italy, where they eventually inspired the character of Turandot. In the famous opera by Puccini, Turandot is a cold, distant princess who challenges her suitors with riddles, executing those who fail. But the real Khutulun wasn't a woman of riddles and executioner's axes. She was a woman of bone, muscle, and horsehair. She didn't hide behind palace walls. She stood in the dirt and challenged the world to move her. The tragedy of Khutulun's legacy is how much of it was erased by the men who followed her. Her brothers and the later Mongol historians sought to downplay her role in the wars against Kublai Khan. They wanted to return to a more traditional patriarchal structure.
Yet she could not be completely forgotten. In Mongolia today, Khutulun is remembered as a national hero. When you watch a traditional wrestling match in the Mongolian Naadam festival, you will notice that the wrestlers wear a unique open-chested vest called a zodug. Legend says that this garment was designed specifically because of Khutulun. After she had spent years defeating men who didn't realize they were fighting a woman until it was too late, the rules were changed. The open vest was mandated to ensure that every participant was a man. While this might seem like a way to exclude women, it serves as a permanent visual tribute to the woman who was so dominant that the rules of the sport had to be rewritten to protect the male ego. Khutulun represents a unique moment in history where skill and strength eclipsed gendered expectations. She was the great-great-granddaughter of the world conqueror, and she carried his fire better than any of his male heirs. She owned 10,000 horses, won through the sheer force of her will. She was a general who never lost a battle, and a wrestler who never touched her back to the ground. Her story is a reminder that history is not just written by the victors, but often edited by those who come after. But some figures are too large to contain by the margins of a page. Khutulun remains the unbeaten defiance of the steppe,
a woman who looked at the most powerful men of her era and told them they simply weren't strong enough. Subscribe for more history.